Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Welcome to the Saturday morning D&D show. My name is Jordan, with a silent PH in the middle, and I am joined always by my wonderful co-host, Sir Lucian, over at Sir Lucian Gaming. Say hello, sir.
Hello, sir.
Hello. Welcome, everybody, to a very special episode. Not necessarily, but I like to say that. A very special episode of the Saturday morning D&D show.
A very average episode.
We're a D&D talk show. I got my beard trimmed and I got a haircut, so it's all very exciting. It's hard to get those haircuts in the pandemic times, so that's where we're at right now. We're gonna talk about some Dungeons and Dragons stuff. There's a little bit of news, and then we're gonna dive right into some Bardic Inspiration. And probably talk about some of our favorite older settings of the Dungeons and Dragons. And then we're going to talk about our games. That's kind of the format of the show. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, tell a friend and all that other jazz. But first and foremost, what is the news of the week, Mr. Lucian?
Well, we're kind of coming hot off of last week's D&D Celebration. So hopefully everybody had a wonderful or fun D&D Celebration if they joined in. I watched...
Did you?
One or two things. I watched the DMs panel.
Yeah.
And that was nice. It was pretty much your standard, typical DMs advice show. It was a group of kind of actors that are DMs, really good DMs, and improv people and Hollywoodish kind of people or California type people. So it was very theater driven kind of, I felt like, advice that you get a lot when you're talking about dungeon mastering, because I think a lot of people like to compare it to that. Like you're gonna be in an improv show, or you're collaborating a story together, and you're always yes and those kinds of things. And those were the types of people, and I get that. That's a style that is very popular. It's a style that lots of people use. It's a style we've used in our games at times. So it was still good to watch. And if you're brand new, absolutely go watch it. There's some really amazing dungeon masters on there giving their advice. Because you had the dungeon master from like Adventure Zone. You had Deborah Ann Wall was on there. You had, I'm trying to think of some of the other dungeon masters. They were from a couple of shows I don't necessarily watch. I only knew a couple of them, but it was still pretty good. Mm-hmm. And Satine was on there. So she always gives really good advice. So that was the one I watched. That's the one I picked up. I watched a little bit of Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford talking about a few things, being a designer. Those are the ones I watched the most. I don't think I watched too many of the games. I don't know. What about you? What'd you get out of D&D Celebration?
No, I watched those panels. The Jeremy Crawford and the Chris Perkins one talking about Rime of the Frost Maiden and going into design, design philosophy of the next book, Tasha's book, the taco book, as I like to call it, Cauldron of Everything. So I watched that, and then I also caught most of the Acquisitions Incorporated stream.
Oh, that's the one I need to go back to.
Which was really fun, and it was really fun to have. They're back in Forgotten Realms, so I don't know if you know this, but like they've been. Avernus and Ravnica and all over the place. They're where are we? And it was fun to see those characters again, especially Strix, because I'll be honest, I missed Holly Conrad. Like I like her as a player, and I like Strix as a character, and she's just fun. So it was fun to have her there, and the feud between her and Jim Darkmagic. But it was a Zoom call, and they're all streaming like you and I do when we stream on the internet. And without all of the pizzazz, without the stage and the audience reacting and laughing and things like that, it felt like every other thing. And it was interesting because a lot of people are like, well, I'll never be at the quality of Matt Mercer, or I'll never do this or this. And I think, I want to say two things, but anyway, the first thing is I think that if we took our regular silly show and put it in front of a live audience and people could react and shout things and things like that, that all of a sudden you would think the quality of your show is so great. And then I want to eat my own words, because when the pandemic first hit and Critical Role said, we can't do regular Zoom call streams. And I was like, why not? That's what everybody else does. Like Critical Role, you're so arrogant and full of yourself that you think that what? But there's a magic to actually playing with each other at, in the same room. And I think they recognize that. So I apologize, Critical Role, 100%. I think they saw that it was very important that even though they're socially distancing, they're like, 6 feet apart from each other while they're streaming. It was very important that they still are in the same room and can look at each other, because the Acquisitions Incorporated stream just kind of felt like your everyday like stream that you see on the internet, which is not bad, but we definitely hold that to a higher level, I think, because it's like, oh, it's Jeremy Crawford's the DM and all of this other stuff. So I don't know, I learned something, but it was a fun game and I like those characters. So
yeah, going on that a little bit, I've noticed the Dungeons and Dragons, when they've been doing their live streams from home, they have really crappy cameras and microphones.
Yeah.
So I think that adds to the issue. Like, you can do Zoom, but you can do it bad. But I've seen some really well done production values where everybody that was going to be on the show had really good lighting for their cameras, really good microphones that weren't picking up stuff. They had it down pat that even if they were talking over each other, it was all equalized out, so it didn't sound too terrible. So I think you could do it, but if you're not putting that effort in, it's definitely going to show. And I think with, I hated Chris Perkins' camera the whole time. I watched all of his panels that he was a part of. I was just like, somebody send him a better camera, please, because you guys, have billions of dollars. Send him a better camera.
Well, they learned from the first one, because I remember the first one, like Chris was dropping frames and it was like you couldn't understand what he was saying. And then some of the other people, I think, if I remember correctly, there was like a cooking show and the camera wasn't pointed at the food. And so he was describing and talking, but like nobody bothered to move the camera down. And so it's little things like that I think a lot of these people are like, well, and I shouldn't say this. They're probably not this arrogant, but what I was going to say is like, I wonder if a lot of people are going, well, I mean, if that Jordan guy can do it, anybody can do it, right? And that was one of the things I had multiple streamer friends that were a little upset that they didn't incorporate more streamers. But for the D&D Celebration event, they actually did incorporate more streamers and podcasts and like the Venture Maidens and a lot of things like that. So it was cool. But no, that was the big takeaway for me. Like, I love Acquisitions Incorporated, but I was watching it and I was just like, it's not this huge stage presence. And if I'm honest, I really liked it when Chris Perkins was the DM more than Jeremy Crawford. I think I just like Chris Perkins as I just like Jeremy. Jeremy's good, but
I don't know why, but yeah. And like Cyberwolf said in chat, which I think was really good, D&D's bad Zoom streams for him gave him confidence to then join other people's streams, so that because theirs was bad, he didn't feel so bad that if he didn't have his camera perfect or his microphone wasn't perfect, he was willing to volunteer for others. So that's definitely a good point to kind of put out there. And I see LB's in our chat too. So we got LB in the house.
Oh, his house. That's always good. Yeah. No, and I guess that's with anything really. Cause like the first couple of videos I made with YouTube, I used a free video editing software I found, and like, it was it was bad. But you do it more and you learn. And it's the same thing with streaming, I think, on the internet. Like my first couple streams were awful. So anyway, but no, I had a lot of good time. It was fun.
Yeah. So that was last week. We were coming off of that. It was, at least we got something when we couldn't meet. We couldn't see a celebration like we had the year before that, which was something that me and you had been talking about a bunch, because it would have been really cool, minus pandemic, that they would have brought people together again. You could have you could have had this really big production that they were putting on like they did for Descent into Avernus. Would have been really cool. But we got an online version of that. Other than that, I just saw on there was a Lore You Should Know video they popped out there called the Redhead Nomad Tribes. I liked it because these were tribes that were mentioned in Storm King's Thunder.
Yeah.
You get a bunch of information there to kind of start you out with the different tribes that are going on. And they call them kind of the Uthgard tribes and the Redhead tribes, and they're like nomadic peoples.
Yeah.
But this one was more about the ones that are up in near Icewind Dale. So if you're running, Rime of the Frost Maiden, and you wanted to, work these tribes in some way, have these different tribes that are out there, what is some information about those? I thought was really
no, and it'd be fun to be a barbarian of that tribe, and you join the party because you have, I got to stop this Frost Maiden business up in Icewind Dale. It's where I live. So yeah.
And I like, there's a part in there where he asks them, well, if a character wants to come from one of these tribes, what types of classes would they play? And they actually came up with really a good reason for almost all of the classes. The hard one they had was the wizard. They couldn't come up with too good of a reason for a wizard, be studious, studying books and stuff, and then somehow come from a nomadic tribe. Not that you couldn't. I'm sure somebody will come up with a way to do it. But the other ones all had, like you said, barbarian, and you could do clerics, and you can do, obviously fighters and thieves and bards and stuff. So there was lots of cool ideas there, rangers and stuff that would fit in those tribes. So if you want to know more about them, you can go check out that Lore You Should Know. There was also a Dragon Talk video that they popped up. This is more probably exciting for me than Jordan, because I always like the Stranger Things tie-in. But it was Jody Hauser and Jim Zub. Jody is the writer of the Stranger Things comic that was like a companion to the show. And then Jim writes all of the Dungeons and Dragons comics. So if you want to, read any of the comics that are Dungeons and Dragons based, official Dungeons and Dragons based, read his. Well, they've been working on one together that is the story of the Dungeons and Dragons characters that the Stranger Things boys play, and what the story is of their characters that they go through. So like, it's almost like a comic about a show. It's like some weird Inception thing going on. But I love it. I can listen to Jim Zub talk all day long. If you haven't seen, he did a TED talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Look it up on the internet. It is a really good, 20-minute TED talk where he talks about the importance of playing Dungeons and Dragons and how it was important to him, and creativity. It was really good. So I can listen to him all the time. Last Gen Con, the one we actually got to go to, I got him to sign a couple of my books, which was really cool.
We ran into him. Well, he was at a booth signing things, but it was still like, hey, you're
super cool. And very nice guy, So it was pretty fun. So that's out there too. There's a Dragon Talk with Jody Hauser and Jim Zub that I liked. And then those are the things I saw on the Dungeons and Dragons channel. I saw you got a couple of things here for us news-wise.
Yeah, so I want to talk about this because our last show last Saturday and then was the D&D Celebration. And then Sunday, they had some more interviews and stuff. And I forget who they were interviewing because I wasn't watching it live. But a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, they're going to do this. But basically, they said that their Wizards of the Coast plan going forward with D&D after Tasha's in the next 2021, 2022, they want to bring back old published settings and more Magic the Gathering settings for 5e. And so everyone started speculating Spelljammer this and Spelljammer that and stuff. And so we were thinking like, well, what are the old settings? And you have Greyhawk, which a lot of people said that they don't want to do Greyhawk because that's tied, or at least TSR didn't want to invest in Greyhawk because that's tied way too much back to Gary Gygax. And then he left TSR at some point, And so they were like, we don't really, maybe not. You have the Forgotten Realms, which we have a really bad, arguably, I guess people would say it's a bad campaign setting book for the Sword Coast. And if they wanted to actually build a whole, here's the long history of the world, not just a couple paragraphs, and here are actual class tie-ins to specific regions and stuff, they could do a Forgotten Realms book. And then we have Dark Sun, Spelljammer, Eberron. I'm trying to think of other ones that we have. Mystara, I think.
Planescape,
yeah. And so a lot of people, well, anyway, so they said 3. They're going to bring 3 basically old settings back to 5e, or to 5e. What settings do you think is going to be? Like, I have my theories, but I wanted to ask you.
Yeah. You always know. And I looked it up. They talked to the product manager, Liz Shue, and the executive producer, Ray Winiger, for Dungeons and Dragons. So a little bit higher level than we get to see normally. We usually get like Nathan and we get, the designers, but this is up in the upper level. I mean, for me, obviously Spelljammer, because I bring it up every single time. I think that would be a good one. I'm sure probably Ravenloft of some sort, because we've already gotten hints, like Cyberwolf had mentioned. Crawford and Perkins have dropped hints about another Gothic horror or some more fleshing out of that world, Barovia or Ravenloft, that style of game. So I'm thinking maybe one of those. And if I like the idea of planes hopping and, having the different planes and having the planes explained again, 5th edition wise. So I want to lean towards like But Planescape itself was like a Monty Cook version of that, right? Because it was a very different art style to it. It was a very different thing going on with it. It was super cool. I'd love it, but I don't know if they're going to jump back to that. I don't think Greyhawk, because it's just too much of Gary's stuff that they would want to do that one. But maybe Birthright. Could they surprise us with a Birthright or a Mystara? Could they surprise us with a Dragonlance? Maybe. I mean, that could come out of left field.
That was another thing about Dragonlance, but people on Reddit were saying that Dragonlance is tied up in some legal stuff. And so, like, Wizards or TSR owned it, but was actually licensing it or something to that effect. And then when it transferred to Wizards, it's like, well, now you don't own this anymore. And so for them to make a Dragonlance setting is like, I don't know. But like, I hear the movie that they want to make. Yeah, but I hear the movie they want to make is a Dragonlance movie. So I don't know. I'm kind of confused. I think, honestly, I think they're going to like redo the Forgotten Realms. They're going to double down on that first and just be like, hey, we've been putting out these adventures. We're not going to make Forgotten Realms adventures anymore. Or maybe they are, but I kind of feel like they might not. And they're like, instead of doing all these Forgotten Realms adventures, you make the adventure. And they'll give us a big thing of all of that other stuff. They're not going to do... And so I think the first one's going to be Forgotten Realms. But it's not going to be Karator, which is the Asia of Forgotten Realms. And they're not going to do Al-Qadim, which is the Middle East of the Forgotten Realms.
They're not going to touch it.
Because it's too controversial, and Wizards has been playing this very safe. And so, and feelings about that aside, whatever, but they don't want to do that. And it's also, in order for them to do that properly, they have to throw a lot of money at very specific people to do a lot of play testing and make sure it's kind of balanced. And even when they do all of that, they're going to get a lot of flack for it. So it's kind of so might as well not do that. So after Forgotten Realms, that leaves, you're right, Ravenloft, Dark Sun, things like that. We have not, Spelljammer.
Space.
We have not seen a lot of stuff for Dark Sun. Like they haven't really like hinted at a lot of that. That's already in the thing. So I think Dark Sun's not going to happen. But I think you're right. I think it's going to be Ravenloft. And I've been doing a lot of studying of the Domains of Dread recently, which was part of the Ravenloft campaign setting because of the Vecna videos that I've been making. And I think that is a very strong direction to go. We already have this Curse of Strahd module. You could just expand on that. And so if people really liked Curse of Strahd and they want to keep playing, boom, here's another Domain of Dread that's operated by a hag. Here's another one that's operated by this. And so you could expand on that whole world and people could run things. And then finally, I think it's going to be Planescape because we had the Great Wheel Cosmology of 2nd edition, and that's when Monty Cook was building Planescape and all that other stuff. And then 3rd edition, they changed it all to the tree and all this other stuff. And 4th edition, they changed it again. But surprise, 5th edition, we're using that 2nd edition wheel cosmology, and the planes are described very much how Monty Cook described them back with Planescape. Yeah. So I think the logical thing would be, here's a book on Sigil, City of Doors, and here's how you actually traverse the planes. And like going from portal town to get to the Nine Hells to go back over here, and actually giving mechanics for traveling through them and what happens when you're on that plane. Because there was a lot of like, when you're in the Nine Hells and you are a evil character, your stats are like boosted, like you're stronger. And that's what kept, hypothetically, this is what keeps angels from just invading the Nine Hells, because they are good characters. When they go to an evil place, their powers are diminished and the devils can attack them. So everybody's kind of in a weird balance because the devils can't go to heaven because then they're weaker and they'll know they'll die. And so I think it's going to be Forgotten Realms, Ravenloft, and Planescape.
Yeah. And there's a lot of planes besides like good and hell. And then like, say the 4 elementals, there's things like limbo and, there's just like a whole plethora of planes that are out there that you could mess around with. That'd be really cool.
That all have very specific things. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that's what it is. And if you want to run a Bitopia like Planescape setting, you could, so, but,
great Modron March.
They've dropped Sigil a couple times and specifically Modrons have popped into a lot of adventures. And so I think I think Planescape's on the horizon, but
that'd be pretty good. I would,
and that'll unify things too, right? Because then I can Planescape jump to Magic the Gathering, or I can jump to my homebrew setting. Or,
I was wondering if they would do that, where they would do a Planescape that then incorporates Eberron, all the worlds that aren't just planes, but the multiverse exploration also inside of that. But I'm surprised. I feel like we would be at a time now too that to build some real excitement, let them build a new campaign setting. Like each of the editions have had or introduced new campaign settings, and we've got lots of third parties introducing new campaign settings. We've got Wizards of the Coast bringing in some Magics of the Gathering, so you're introducing some things that exist.
And Wild Mount.
They haven't created anything themselves.
Yeah, Wild Mount was brought into 5e, but you're right, they didn't create that in-house.
They didn't create it,
And I said, we both said that it would be really cool for them to be like, here's the races we want in the game, like Tieflings and Dragonborn, and we can create where they came from the ground up, rather than trying to force them into Forgotten Realms or something.
What is Chris Perkins, for all of his career that I can think of, has worked on properties that either already exist, and he's worked stories into those existing imaginations. So the kernel of imagination, for the most part, came from somebody else's world, and then he has brought in really cool stories to tell in those worlds, right? But what do we get if we get the Chris Perkins world or the Jeremy Crawford world or any of the designers that are there? We got a lot of designers in there. Those are the two that we see all the time, but there's lots of designers. If they get the go ahead to say, that's it, new campaign setting, throw everything at the wall, what sounds cool, what's great, what's fun, where do you want to take this? What is your stamp on the Dungeons and Dragons worlds? I'd love to see it. I think 5th edition needs one of those. We've only gotten previous editions rehashes at this point. We haven't gotten anything specifically 5e only that none of the other editions have touched or had or did anything.
And I doubt they'll do that, just because they're playing off of nostalgia, big time. And I want to point out, thank you so much, chat of YouTube. You were saying that it's not Monty Cook who designed Planescape, it's Zeb Cook. And that is correct. I know Monty's name is on a couple of those Planescape books, but the overall designer, you're right, was Zeb. That's why I was thinking Monty Cook, but yeah, Zeb Cook. David Zeb Cook.
I gotcha.
So thank you for pointing that out. Mr. Skull Dixon, always the man in the know, that Mr. Skull Dixon. So that's where we're going with that. I mean, we'll see what we get. 2021 is right around the corner, but we probably won't see announcements until April. We're going to be full on Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, probably until, well into the next year. But that brings us to we kind of talked about the new rules that Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is going to happen. I assume, Mr. Lucian, that your Dungeon of the Mad Mage game is not going to be finished by the time Tasha's Cauldron of Everything comes out.
Oh, we got characters already looking at what they want to do with something coming from that.
Oh, really? And so that's what I was going to say. Are you going to update your characters with Tasha's? Maybe swap some things around. Like, I kind of went this way with a bard, but now I want to try this stuff with a bard. Or even like, can I swap out this cantrip with this because I want new Tasha's Cauldron of Everything cantrips? What are you going to do?
Yeah, our dungeon master has been really good about if a new book comes out, that stuff's fair game for the most part. Even UA articles, he's been really good about letting us use even UA articles, which sometimes are a little bit overpowered. They're not quite tweaked back, but he's been able to deal with that. I think in my own games, I also would do that typically when we had Volos come out, when we had Mordecaians come out, when we had Xanathar's Guide come out. I let those all in my campaign immediately too.
But like if hypothetically, if Mordecaian's Tome of Foes just came out, and I'm like, Lucian, I'm in your game, I'm having a lot of fun, I'm playing a dwarf, but can he be a Gith now? Like, would you allow that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool.
For sure. I'd let my
Do you do a story thing, or do you just say, you've always been a Gith, you're fine?
Yeah, well, it depends how excited you are, and I'd let you tell me how this is going to work. Do you want to do a different character? Are you talking about, swapping something in and out? Are you talking about just switching it or whatever? I'd let you decide, especially if you come to me super excited about it, because I've always wanted to play a Gith, and I get that because ever since I read Fiend Folio and I saw that Gith Yankee on the cover, I wanted to play one of those. We still haven't got to play that type of one.
Yeah,
we've gotten the player type one. We haven't gotten that one on the front cover of Fiend Folio
yet. The Astral Plane Fiend Folio one. I got it right over there. Sorry.
I love it.
Check out my Twitter for my new background. I got my AD&D books up. It's fun.
Fiend Folio was the image that captured me. That was the one that is the most iconic to me of Dungeons and Dragons. I love it so much.
That's awesome. I don't know.
What about you? What about your campaigns? You're pretty stingy on stuff.
Well, I think my campaign, I think Rod of Seven Parts is going to be done around that time. And so we're going to have
6 parts, right?
Yeah, they've got 6 parts now. They need the 7th. They're like, if you watch the show on Wednesday, I literally said, I was like, we're in the end game now. Like, we're pushing to the very end. We got to destroy Miska the Wolf Spider. It's big time. Queen of Chaos is on their tails. So we'll see.
And then we're good.
I think when we get to that point, if Ted and LB and stuff want to keep playing, we're gonna probably reevaluate who's being a dungeon master, who's gonna run what, and at that point, if I'm still running these characters and they want to take them up to like level 20 or something, it's like, okay, well I can do other games, like that's fine. But that being said, I think I'm okay incorporating some stuff, but just full on swapping the race you're playing or things like that, I don't know if I would be super comfortable with that, unless there was some kind of in-story thing that made it happen. But you're right, it's a conversation that you would have, but definitely new spells and stuff. And in my Wildmount game, I talked to my DM, and we're gonna incorporate some of the elemental spirit summoning that is Unearthed Arcana, and I'm going to use some of that for my character. So when Tasha's comes out, we'll probably just swap it over to, he was always using the official spell, and you just kind of hand wave it.
Yeah. And I think to clarify what I was saying too, is like, you have to be excited. You have to have a story reason you want to play it, not because, hey, I want to change my dwarf because now I can get this +3 strength if I take this other character, and that's going to make my fighter much better.
Well, and that's what
that conversation's not quite the route I'm going to go.
I think that's what I was going to talk to you about, because that's the question I wanted to ask, because story reasons, you can do a lot of cool things, but there are those players that are just like, well, now that this book is out, my min-maxing is not maxed, and my half-elf bard is just no good anymore, and I really need him to be this Gith Yankee bard that has psionics and da-da-da. So I just want to change that. And I think a lot of people are going to kind of be like, well, I want to do that, So
my min-max archer, I'm one of those players, just so I know exactly where that player's coming from. I know exactly what the argument is, because I'm playing a min-maxed archer that I want to make sure is the best of all archery of archers can be archery. And so they come out with something that says, this race is allowed to use special bows that do +10 damage all the time. You're like, well, brain's gonna go to,
I be that.
I need that. Yeah. So I do get that. And the tricky way around it, players wise, is I typically, if I'm done with a character, I'll let the dungeon master know, but I don't mind killing off a character either. Throwing them into the mix of battle, and that character dies, and now I get to do something different with a different character to bring it in that way, or bring in a different story type character, or play a different thing. I like to play them for their quirks, and I like to play them for, I do theory craft, and I do think about, it would be cool with this class and this combination, and what would that look like? That seems fun to do that and see what that would look like, or to play famous characters from pop culture or stuff I'm reading or watching, and say, I want to bring, Naruto in, or I want to bring in, Vampire Hunter D. How do I make that character, or something like that? So I do understand that too. So I try to be flexible, because I know players come from all different reasons on what characters they want to play. And I do play with some min-maxers. So I do get that too.
Yeah. So there, I don't know. It's going to be
your
interesting
table,
with,
your rules,
with Tasha's coming out. Mostly because we were doing some like hypothetical swapping around in one of my Discords, and using the Adventures League rules, it was like, well, clearly the best race is this. I think it was one of the dwarves that you can play, because if you can swap out the proficiencies such as like I'm proficient with this axe, and change that into I'm now proficient with thieves tools or something like that, then looking at certain races, there is just it's better to have this one than any other. And it's like, oh, well, now I could be a wizard that wears heavy armor because of the dwarf, but I could still have my intelligence. And so it's interesting. It's gonna be a brand new game, I think, and a lot of stuff is going to change.
And anyways, because they're supposed to give us the new rules on how to handle heritage or races anyways, right? So if a lot of people adopt those optional rules, and taco is optional.
They're always going to do that because they want the core 3 books to be the way you can play D&D, but if you want to have more settings.
Right. And so Dungeon Masters out there, if you see something that's going to be problematic for your campaign, don't be afraid. I've done it in my campaign. There was a couple of things where I said, okay, everything's free game, but this one thing that's going to mess with the campaign, so I'm not allowing that one thing.
Yeah.
And just get everybody's buy-in on it and like say, here's why I think it's going to be I don't think it'll work. I want to keep it out. Like, I think it was like Goodberry. I took Goodberry out of my campaign because I wanted them to have some survival aspects. I wanted them to...
They had to go find food,
to deal with food and water in a frontier situation where they've never been, and I wanted it to be hard. And then the druid, one of them took druid. He's like, well, I'm a druid. I'll be able to know it. I'm like, yeah, but you're in a land you've never seen. You don't know that plant from any other plants here because you've never been here. Yeah, you're a druid, but you're a druid of Sword Coast. So...
No, that makes sense. So I have a question for you. I don't know. You know this. For the last 2 Octobers, maybe 2. I have been running a Halloween Kids on Bikes game. And this has been a lot of fun. We do my at-home players, and we play Kids on Bikes, and it's always, here's the game set on Halloween. So it's like you are kids on Halloween, and then here's the adventure. And so the first time I did this, and if you guys are interested in these, I have them uploaded to the Saturday Morning D&D Show YouTube channel, and you can find them and listen to them, or they're also on my Patreon as a podcast.
Podcast stuff too, right?
Yeah, so we recorded them, and they're just podcasts, and they're fun. Yeah. But so it's become a Halloween tradition now. We've done it 2 years in a row, and we're going to do a third one. So the first year, I did ghosts, and it was kind of spooky. And the second year, we did... weird magical crystals were changing the world and altering reality, and that was a lot of fun because they had to go on this adventure to find these. I think they thought it was candy or something, but it turned out to be this stuff that was just causing all this weird magical things. So in one house, they went trick or treating and they found that there were skeletons dancing everywhere. I'm kind of paraphrasing because it's been a long time since I watched or listened to that episode, obviously. A year, in fact. So this year, I have to come up with a Halloween Kids on Bikes game. We're going to play on October 9th, so I can release it before or on Halloween for you guys. I have no idea. What should I do? What monsters, like, should we do classic, like, witches, Sasquatch? What are you thinking? Like, I want some help from my friends and family of the internet.
Yeah.
What should my players run
the
into?
Classic, the storyline. There was an old movie. I forget if it was 80s or if it was 90s. I think it might have been 80s. The Body Snatchers.
Yeah, Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Of the pod people that came from, like, there's a comet is kind of the precursor to it, and then some people start acting kind of strange, and then we find out there's little pods growing outside their house that have taken them over, and then by the end is like the last person figures out everybody's a pod person, and that's how the movie, spoilers, kind of end. If you haven't seen it yet, well, it's been since the 80s, so you could have gone and watched it. That would be a great one. Or do something and that's why I like that one, and something based on The Thing, which again was a creature who was able to take the form of things to hide within them, and that created the tension and the scariness and the hysteria. Or Aliens, it was inside them until it burst out and it hunted down. So I like this idea of taking over, or maybe looking like normal, but there's something's making you think something's wrong, something's going on, they're acting a little strange. Why is that?
I could do that with and then hand a secret card to every player and be like, you're the Thing, here's your motivation.
That werewolf game, that game where we saw them playing in Gen Con, where everybody's in a chair and who's a werewolf, or
yeah
Secret Werewolf, I think, are the names of those games where you don't quite know who's who, and you're doing voting kind of stuff, which I think would be
the thing could be really fun. It's interesting because Kids on Brooms came out, and I got that, and I wanted to try and incorporate some of the Kids on Brooms mechanics, which is like casting spells. So I thought it might be fun to have witches and the players find a magic wand, and they have to figure out how to use it. And whoever has the magic wand has the Kids on Brooms mechanics. But Kids on Brooms is really like you are children at a magical school. And I could take some of those mechanics, but it almost makes it that I should just, I don't know, like this magic item does this and give them like, I don't know. I'm trying to think. But if you guys have interesting ideas, we're getting a couple here. Some people were saying like classic Universal movie monsters, which would be really fun. But yeah, put them down below because it would be fun to use something. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I got to think of something fast because I only have like a couple of weeks to come up with it before I have to run this game.
Yeah. What about a cool, because is it for who's going to be playing in it? Is it your wife in that group?
Yeah.
Do a vampire one.
I know. I was thinking about that.
That would be one that.
So if you don't know, my wife loves vampires, and she runs something called the Vampire Movie Club. I have a coffee mug here that she made, and so you can find that podcast, Vampire Movie Club, and I'm on it occasionally, where they're trying to watch every vampire movie ever, and it's just funny. But
have that. You have your kids, you have your opening scene, and the whole storyline's about a vampire who's moved into town.
Well, I see.
And let them think about it. And how do they find out about it? And what did they do about it? Because they're just kids. Nobody believes them.
I don't know. Anyway.
Which one? All right, I got you.
Well, it's too like every movie she's seen. And I would want to do something that's not, I don't know, maybe not. I can't read or write. Okay. Anyway,
fool her. Like it's a challenge to your dungeon master skills. How long until she guesses?
Until she realizes that they're vampires.
Do everything possible so she doesn't know it's a vampire story till the end.
Last in the news, I want to talk about. Well, I'm just going to talk. I'm going to unannounce it, but Jetpack 7 is making a fantasy setting for D&D 5e called Blackstorm Realms that is D&D in space. So we've talked about Spelljammer a lot, and if you guys are interested in that, go check it out. When it actually debuts, we might talk about it a little bit more. But right now, they're not using D&D mechanic. They're not using the D&D system to have sci-fi mechanics. It's literally like you're a wizard and you can cast fireballs in space and stuff. But it looks really cool. The art looks really neat. But that's going to bring us over to Lucian's favorite part of our show, the Bardic Inspiration. Oh, so exciting.
I played mine.
So exciting, that Bardic Inspiration. Yeah. So, Mr. Lucian,
you want me to go with mine first?
I would like you to go with yours first. What inspired you this week in the world of D&D, and how can we incorporate it into some kind of game?
Well, LB just inspired me because she said there's always the classic movie, My Mom is Dating a Vampire from the Disney Channel.
Oh, that's a movie? Okay.
The classic.
The classic Disney Channel movie, My Mom is Dating a Vampire.
Classic Disney Channel movie. So mine was a stolen Bardic Inspiration. We all, on Dungeons & Dragons, there's quite a bit of a Twitterverse out there for Dungeons & Dragons Twitter stuff. And I happened to be scrolling along, and one of the more popular kind of posters or persons that are out there talking about stuff a lot is Sly Flourish. You'll see his name pop up here or there when he's talking about D&D stuff or rules or just asking questions and generating comments and conversation. And he had a great question that I thought would be a perfect opener for today, the cold open. And what I mean by that is starting your campaign. And his question was, hey, if you're going to run Rime of the Frostmaiden and you're going up to Icewind Dale, brand new characters, how did you bring them together? Why, how do you get them up there? How are they even up there? Why are they even up there? So I thought for Bardic Inspiration today, we might put out some ideas on how you start your campaign and how do you bring them characters together. Or have you been the dungeon master, which has been me lately, who's kind of been lazy and just said, you know what, you guys are just already together and we're going to move on.
You meet in a tavern. You're fine.
Playing that out. Right. So what about Jordan's games? I feel like, how are you doing your games when you're starting that campaign? How are you explaining the players know each other?
Well, let's think about some of my games. So Hot Springs Island, we very much they were all prisoners together. And part of their prison sentence is that they're on this island and they had to do that. So that's how they met. And they stayed together really for survival purposes. Like, it's better for us to be in a group rather than I'm just going to go off on my own and die. So.
And was that stated or was that role played in the game?
That was stated at the very beginning. Okay. And I said, here's the premise that we're going to go for. And then they kind of went with it. So when they were dropped off on they were on a boat and they got dropped off on the island. And the guy's just like, okay, I need you to bring me back gold in order to pay off your debt. And in order for you to do this, you need to go. And they're just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, what's out there? And they're like, I don't know. Apparently there's gold. Go find it. The more you bring us back, the more that magical curse will free you. And then you'll eventually be able to leave the island. And so that was the whole premise. I think Greyhawk, Saltmarsh, Ghost of Saltmarsh, I just said, you guys are, you're all coming to the town of Saltmarsh. How did you get there? And some of them were like, well, I came in on a boat, or I was from this region, or I've been living here my whole life. And then we kind of just had them meet up because a local, I want to say king, but like basically the governor of Saltmarsh was like, I need you to investigate this stuff. And then that's how they came together. But yeah, I'm bad at that now that I'm describing this. I was like, oh yeah, I don't know.
What is your cold open? Yeah. How do you play that out? I kind of gotten lazy because it was hard to figure out, because it can be awkward too. If you just have your players sit down and they're all staring at each other and like, okay, guys, you're in a tavern, go ahead and meet naturally and become great bestest friends that you want to go on life-threatening adventures with. And I'll sit and wait until you guys do that. That just doesn't always feel right. So a cold open, I thought, was like, why would we put them up into Icewind Dale? I like the idea. He had mentioned that, we could go the prisoner route. Some people do the prisoner route, which is just like exactly what she did. So you're stuck and thrown together and you have to do something. I like the idea that they are criminals running from the law. And maybe that's a way that they've gotten up there, and maybe try to use that as an in and role play that out. On my couple of campaigns, I'm trying to think back on the ones, Storm King's Thunder, we just said you guys already know each other so that we could start moving on and playing the game and get it moving. The one I did like was the one we did with Mick Lancy Waddle's mini adventure that we did with you and LB and or PB. I'm
PB.
Sorry. Yeah. Get the B's right. Yeah. And
don't get your B's
confused. What I liked about that is you were playing teenagers that had lived all of their life at a town, and the town council had decided to train their kids in adventuring skills because of a tragedy that had happened in town where some kids had went out and got themselves basically killed because they were out trying to adventure on their own and they weren't telling anybody, and it was just a tragedy. And the town council came together and said, we can't let that happen. And they're going to do it. We can't just say, no, don't go out there because it's a dangerous world. So it'd be better if we just taught them and prepared them early. And then that way, at least they have something to fall back on. So I like that idea of that's how you knew each other. Maybe you did some training together before you went out on your adventure and you can kind of learn, see each other. But it's tough to figure out, how do these characters come together? The other thing I've been thinking about too is this idea where the one character is central and you're relying on that person to gather the others for the thing they want to do, right? So the campaign kickoff, and it might not even be the main campaign, but it's how you start the kickoff, is this one person has this thing to do. You pick one of your players, one of probably the most outgoing players. You say, okay, what's your big thing? And here you've been tasked to do this, but you need some other people to help you. How are you going to go find those people, and where are you going to find them at? And then talk to the other players to then develop characters that kind of suit that and bring them together that way.
That sounds like a heist. And you're just like,
there you go.
You go off and you're just like, hey, I need a guy that does gymnastic stuff. And he goes, you son of a bitch, I'm in. And then he goes to the next guy. I need a guy that can weld things. Yeah. That could be fun. And then that would be actually an interesting way to start, is if you're like, okay, I've got one player and he builds his character or whatever, and you have the world all set up, a conversation with the DM, and then that player is like, I'll go find the players. And so he literally is calling people, and he's like, hey, my character needs somebody who does this. You want to build a character that does...
You got a character concept that would fit that. And then they could like collab and like, okay, I wanted to play this Elven Ranger that could do this and that.
And then you, the DM, could be the guy that's hiring them. That would be fun, yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually what I'm doing in this. When I kick off my next campaign, I have it based around our dwarven character who wants to open up a mine. And he's having to go and get the other players to help him as things start to happen, and I'm letting it stay centric on him and putting that on the players to come up with versus me trying to tell them, how they all come together. So,
yeah,
that's my idea.
Another one
Bardic Inspiration.
I listen to Board with Life Adventures. They're a fun podcast, and they are doing a thing called XP Academy, where all of these kids are at this school for like adventurers.
I like that.
And the kids are there because they were all born under a special star on a certain year. And so these are like really rare kids that have this adventuring potential, and that's why they're there. And I thought that was kind of fun. So they're just in a school setting where they get to be like, okay, I guess we'll hang out. I don't know. And so
you got to do that seventh son or the seventh daughter of the seventh daughter, and they bring all those together.
No, it's fun. And so they're kind of special. I like it.
Cool. Well, what was your Bardic Inspiration then?
Yeah, so I've been reading a lot about the planes and like the Domain of Dread and the Astral Sea and things like that. And one of the interesting things about the Astral Sea, especially from 4th edition, where it was kind of a physical sea that you could swim on, is that it's an area for dead gods to be at. And it makes me think of I forget the name of the place in Guardians of the Galaxy, but they fly to that ancient head.
Yeah, nowhere.
Nowhere. That's where it was. Thank you. But that's also like an ancient being that they're mining out this things. Well, there's places like that in the Astral Sea, like these giant god corpses that are just floating around. And sometimes there's towns on them and people build things because it's like an island and they can live there. So it got me thinking of where do those come from? How do they get there? And then what if the plot of your game is, I want to resurrect this old god and throw the world into chaos? Or maybe that's the evil villain wants to do that and you have to stop that. So my Bardic Inspiration was, I wanted to do the session 0 is actually like, if I have 4 players, I'm going to give them 4 ridiculously statted god sheets. And so I'm like, I want you to play these sheets. And I'm kind of stealing this from Out of the Abyss. And if you've read Out of the Abyss, there's a mechanic where you as the players can kind of play the demon lords, and it's fun. So, and then I wanted to have them literally have a fight to the death. So these 4 gods are fighting each other. And we could use miniatures, we could do anything way, and they might have special abilities, who knows? And maybe it's like one's the god of rangers, so he's like a really powerful ranger or something. But whoever dies, that's the corpse that's floating around in the Astral Sea. So then when you start the campaign and the players are on this thing, they are like, oh, this is like so-and-so who died. And I know that his magic, like, but I guess my character doesn't know, but like, I know that the magic comes from his bones or something. And I thought that could be fun because then the players have a little more investment in the world that you're creating because they literally were there at the dawn of time when these other 3 gods ganged up and killed this one god or something. So
I love it. So now, because every time you say your Bardic Inspiration, it makes me think of one based on what you just said. Now I want to go to my party and I want to say to them, hey, I want you guys to make level 20 characters. Trick them out. The best you can make, the most, whatever you want to do, whatever cool thing you've ever thought to do, level 20s, go ahead and make them. And I'm hoping that they're thinking, oh, all right, Lucian's going to get us to play this high level 20 campaign. And then when I'm going to take all those character sheets and say, this is the pantheon of evil now. You've created all that is evil in the world. And now we're starting at level 1, and these are what you have to take out. Your mission is to kill these characters you've created. Oh, that'd be so fun because they would know them. They
Yeah.
were the ones that created them, and I'd let them even do the backstories, and then eventually how they turned evil and how they are ruling the world, and they're the dread overlords of the world and need to be overthrown, and then start your campaign off with that. Oh, that would be so fun. I love it. That's a good one. That made me start thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that
What?
idea. And I like the image of the Astral Sea, even if it's not a true sea, but it still acts like a sea, and there's maybe astral ships that float on it.
Yeah.
And you come across this mountainous form that you realize is the corpse of a dead god, of a previous god. And what can be done with that? Do you resurrect it? Do you mine it? Do you extract things from it? Do you destroy it further so it can never come back because it was such a terrible evil when it was around? Or what are the things that are happening there? What will your players do? That's such a cool game.
Or magic item creation. I've been thinking a lot about that, and it's like, okay, in order to make this shield, you're going to need the thumbnail of a dead god, and like that's a whole thing to go and find it and then extract it. And it's not, a thumbnail from a dead god is not made of bone and chitin or whatever else. You have to, it's probably some crazy magical material that you then have to figure out how to mold and shape into a shield. But once you do, you can reflect spells or something crazy.
Something cool.
I really like it. I think it's awesome. So that I've been reading a lot of older stuff lately, and hopefully these will all come out in new videos. So if you guys are interested, that'll be fun. So we've got a little bit of time left. Lucian, how is your Dungeon of the Mad Mage game going? What's going on there?
Pretty good. It was funny. Again, never trying to put any spoilers in, but it's going to be 20 something levels of dungeon madness. So you're going to see just about every type of creature that pops in the monster manual at some point, just to fill out all those levels. It was a weird coincidence the way we explored some areas that when I was sitting back looking at it from the lens of like it was a show or a movie or something, we ran into three different things. We ran into some Nothics, then we were separate. Then we ran into some gibbering mouthers, and then we ran into, I think they were either anhags or Melianoths or something like that, big insect-looking creatures. And I got this, it was funny that those three creatures together then gave me this very big Cthulhu vibe. Like if you wanted to mix, you were doing a Cthulhu-esque Eldritch God kind of campaign, and you mix certain things together just because of how they look, not necessarily anything else about them, but just the idea of this thing that's covered in mouths, this thing with this weird gaping eye, these things that are really insect-like and very, very foreign and weird mandible stuff. I liked how that combination gave me this vibe of Cthulhu, even though it wasn't intended. That's not what they were trying to do, or it wasn't even in there. But because that's how we happened to come across them, you start to get that creepy vibe. I like that. So it started making me think about like what other combinations, like if you took three combinations of creatures and those are the three things you meet, it kind of forms your kind of imagination a little bit. You could push something towards the Fae, or it could push something towards the Shadowfell, or it could push something towards, weird aberrations and things, just because it just happened to be the three. So I started thinking about, as a dungeon master, how I might be able to use that if I want to theme an area in a certain way, using the combinations, not just one creature, but like a 3 or a 4 creature combo to make that feeling come across. I thought would be really fun and challenging.
Yeah,
so that's been really good.
I like the idea of planes like touching in a way, and so you're just like, we're not in the Feywild, but like it's bleeding out, and you can tell that it's bleeding out because like the plants are now like moving and attacking you. And in the case of your Cthulhu thing, the Far Realm or something, you might be in a forest and the Far Realm's bleeding through, and so you encounter instead of, Nothics have their own history, but instead of the old man in the cabin, he's been under this radiation for so long that when he comes out, he is a Nothic, and you have to, what is going on here, and instead of antlers on the deer, he's got tentacles moving around or something, and you could then change or reskin a deer to be, monster-wise, change the deer to be like an
and that's what I was thinking too, like use
the
aesthetic of the creature, not necessarily the background or what where their normal habitat is or whatever D&D wise, but use that aesthetic to try to draw in some ambiance and some, fill in some of the setting that you're doing for the area you're in. So I thought that was pretty cool. I'm loving Dungeon Mad Mage. I feel like we're probably close to maybe getting down to the 3rd level. So maybe a lot of you
many levels to go through.
Second before the campaign has petered out. Ours, I'm hoping to get to the 3rd level.
Does it pyramid? So like because those are big levels, and then I wonder if you get to like the 5th, is it like, okay, this is a little easier to explore the whole thing? Because I'm like, you guys are going to be playing this for like years, I feel.
I'm hoping. I'm gonna love it. I love it. I've always wanted to play the big mega dungeon. So not very few dungeon masters can stick with it. I'm one of them. My attention span can't stick with it. But to be able to play a mega dungeon, 25, 26 levels of dungeon.
Yeah.
That's tough to find. You don't get a lot of people playing like that. So
yeah.
Cool. What about Jordan's games?
Yeah. So I guess the big one is Rod of 7 Parts, where my players went to this weird demi-plane, and they ran into an old man that was like maybe a necromancer or something, but they were like, I don't know, not sure about his backstory. And it turns out that he is a pit fiend from the 9 Hells. And it's kind of interesting because like Asmodeus knows that if the Queen of Chaos, who is a demon, gets the Rod of Fragments back and frees her lieutenant, Miska the Wolf Spider, the Blood War is going to be tipped in the balance of the demons. Like, it's going to be amazing. It's just way too much. And so the 9 Hells has a potential of losing this war. So when they got a Rod Fragment, they were like, all right, Pit Fiend Devil, you're in charge of guarding this. I'm going to put you in this weird extra dimensional space, and we'll seal that off from the Queen of Chaos so she can never get in there, but also you could never leave. And so he's been there for, who knows how long. Using the power of the other Rod Fragments, our players were able to pierce that and get through, but they're not going to be able to leave until they get that Rod Fragment from him. So it was an interesting thing. They were trying to figure out what he was. My players got a little confused. If I'm honest, it wasn't my favorite episode because I thought it was going to go in a kind of a different direction, and they were very focused on like, well, we better go kill this guy. And then I kind of frankly had to just say, you don't have to. Like, I'm doing a bad job of explaining that you do not have to kill this guy because he wants to give you the rod if you promise to use it for the right thing. Because this guy doesn't want to be in this plane anymore. So it was a fun conversation. They ended up getting the 6th Rod Fragment from this pit fiend without much conflict. And then from that, they were able to leave the demiplane. Or the demiplane just served its purpose and collapsed. They don't really know. But now there is a tornado over Baldur's Gate, and they have to figure out what's going on with that. And they think that their magical orrery that opens to pocket dimensions does that. And speaking of Planescape and stuff like that, I didn't make this up. This is part of the adventure, but the last Rod Fragment is actually in Pandemonium, which is a plane of existence that is not hospitable and nice. So, excuse me. So I'm going to have a lot of interesting mechanics to play with, and I'm already plotting a bunch of stuff about when they go into Pandemonium, are they going to be able to, like, because apparently fire magic doesn't work because the winds are so fast, it just blows it away. So there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff like that I'm looking forward to playing around with. But that is in the future. And for those of you who watch me on Sundays prep, we're not going to play next Wednesday, so I'm not going to prep tomorrow. So I will not be on the Twitches tomorrow morning. But yeah.
Crazy. So have they put the rods together, though?
No. So they currently have a 3 fragment rod, a 2 fragment rod, and a 1 fragment rod. And so they need to combine all of them. And I told them that basically, like, if you're going to want to kill Miska, like, you need to have all the rod fragments together. And so they're like, oh, okay, like, we better put them together. So they have to take care of this tornado first, and then they have to figure out how to do that. But it's going to be interesting when they do, because then one one player has it, and that player will become very, very powerful.
I hope it turns into a fire tornado. Is what
Ooh, okay.
fire tornado or a shark tornado. Either one is really.
Maybe it'll go over the water and pull up some sharks. That could be fun. That could be a fun joke. Actually, I should do that.
Yeah. Right when they go into Pandemonium, it follows them in, and it's a shark tornado.
So Pandemonium is my next place, and it's funny because when we started this adventure, LB was talking to me and she's like, hey, I've never done a Planescape adventure. Like I've never gone to a different plane. So she said, when this adventure is over, you should run another one where we go to another plane. And I was like, oh, little do you know that by the end of this adventure, you will be plane hopping all over. So it'll be fun.
That's cool.
Yeah. That's my game. Pretty much Wildmount is tonight. We're fighting in a Coliseum. I don't know. The DM's just kind of like, I just wanted to have something fun. So we ran into this like traveling Coliseum thing, and there's a big dome, and we have to go in certain rounds and defeat people. But if we kill people, then we're disqualified and arrested. So it all has to be non-lethal damage, which I don't know if you know this, but rules is written, you can't say my lightning spell does non-lethal damage.
Magic is not non-lethal.
Magic cannot be non-lethal.
Yeah, nor
like
you
arrows, can with a weapon. You can say,
daggers. Yeah. Nothing thrown is non-lethal.
So that's gonna be interesting, and we're gonna have a new player join us, which is gonna be fun. So he's rolling up a fighter, I think, and it'll be good. So tonight I'm really excited. Again, that's Joshe Manu, my Conjuration Wizard. He's really fun. Yeah. There's a dog barking. That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Real quick, I was gonna say, Lucian, if you did not watch my video on using Notion for campaign prep, you should watch it.
Actually.
Oh, okay.
In fact, and then on Twitter, even later, Notion, the company, then linked to your videos saying, here's another Notion video you can watch. I thought somewhere out on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Because I thought you might find it interesting, and I didn't get to tell you that in the beginning.
Yeah, and you mentioned exactly what I use, which is OneNote in the very beginning, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm using OneNote, and then you were talking about Notion, which was really cool, which... Yep, definitely wanted to look at. Because I like the idea of being able to create a database and then be able to link pages that bring stuff from that database. I think
it's really fun. It's been useful for me, and I really like it a lot for my creating. Apparently, Google's making another, basically kind of the same thing as Notion. It's called Google Files. It's in beta right now, and I signed up for the beta, and I've been playing around with it a little bit. They want you to pay a lot more money to utilize its functions than Notion.
Sure.
But it could be good. I like the way that it could integrate with Google Drive, which is what I use for a lot of things.
And I still want to dive into that World Anvil that I keep seeing a lot of other Dungeons and Dragons people talk about. So.
Anyway, thank you guys so much. That's our show. We really appreciate you guys coming out and watching us live or listening to the podcast. Please like, subscribe, share this video with your friends. Tell a friend. We would like to grow. We would also like Apple iTunes reviews would be really wonderful. Thank you guys again. Anything else before we take off, Mr. Lucian?
I'm gonna go beat some dogs because they keep barking.
You are not. You are not. You are an animal lover. We do not want to say that.
But actually, what it means is I'm going to give them biscuits. So
they need treats, basically. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next week with another episode of the Saturday Morning D&D Show. Goodbye.